The Radio Memories Network is brought to you in part by Liberated Syndication. Podcast publishing made easy. Libsyn.com. That's Libsyn.com.
Had a hard day at the office. Backache from bending over a hot stove all day. Want to get away from it all?
We offer you Escape.
It is midnight, and you are alone. Suddenly the room is plunged into darkness. You sit frozen with terror, because something is there behind you. Something you feared would come. Something from which you must escape.
Escape, produced and directed by William N. Robeson, and carefully plotted to free you from the four walls of today for a half hour of high adventure.
Tonight, we escape to London and a world made strange and terrifying by the workings of an ancient barbaric curse, as Montague R. James tells it in his weird story, Casting the Runes.
My name is Edward Dunning. I'm a scientist. I'm used to dealing with facts, not fairy tales. I'm regarded as Britain's leading authority on medieval life. And as such, I've studied much of the ancient fears and barbaric superstitions of those times. I should have been the first to scoff at any suggestion that the ancient powers of evil, the black magic of Teutonic days, could be believed and practiced in the 20th century. A few weeks ago, I should have laughed had you told me that a curse, a hex, could kill a man. Today, I cannot laugh. It has happened to a man I know of. And now, it's happening to me. My first presentiment of danger came on that day a few weeks ago when I dropped in to see Alfred Smythe, Secretary of the National Science Association, and found him in a state of irritation.
Lost it all, Dunning. I almost wish you hadn't been so brutally honest in your report on that Carswell paper.
Why? What's the trouble?
Oh, he's such a frightful fellow. He's raising a terrible row.
You mean Carswell himself?
Yes, it's bad enough a vicious charlatan like that calling himself a scientist. But now he's taking all his vindictiveness out on me.
Sorry, old chap. It's really me he'd like to get at.
As a matter of fact, that's just what his last letter was about. He wants to know what supposed authority wrote the report rejecting his paper.
You didn't give him my name.
Heavens, no. As a matter of fact, Dunning, I haven't and I won't, and for a very special reason. Call it silly, call it crazy, call it what you will. I have an uncanny feeling about that man Carswell.
Why?
Do you know anything about him?
Nothing. I've never seen him. I only know that he wrote a paper called The Truth of Alchemy. It was hopeless.
Precisely. And why was it hopeless?
Well, besides being abominably written, it was supposed to prove that alchemy, black magic, and such rot actually exist. I think the man really believes it.
Undoubtedly he does, and that's what I mean. He lives in an isolated old house in Warwickshire. He's rarely seen elsewhere, and in his whole career he's written only two things. This paper and the history of witchcraft published 10 years ago.
Yes, of course. I remember now. So that's the man.
Yes, and that book was even worse than this paper. The man has a warped mind. I'm sure he's tried every unhealthy experiment in alchemy, witchcraft, and black magic. There's no telling to what lengths of vindictiveness a man like that might go.
Well, it does sound a bit queer, but...
Not queer, Dunning. Evil.
Oh, come. Man has a right to believe what he likes. He has a right to be angry with me. Here I've glibly scoffed at the man's life's work.
Well, perhaps I'm being overly suspicious and imaginative, but I think there's more than anger involved here, Edward. This may sound fantastic to you, but, well, John Harrington wrote the report condemning that witchcraft book of Carswell's 10 years ago. 3 months later, Harrington was dead.
But, Alfred, what's the connection?
Harrington died under very peculiar circumstances. He was walking home alone late one night, and suddenly he screamed, broke into a run, lost his hat and stick, and climbed up a tree. A dead branch gave way. He fell and broke his neck. No one's ever been able to explain why it happened.
Come now, Alfred. Surely you're not suggesting...
Oh, I don't know what I'm suggesting. I only know that after he reviewed Carswell's book, John Harrington didn't have a moment's peace. Now you've written an unfavorable review of this paper. If I were you, I should keep that fact well hidden.
Oh, Alfred. Well, that's ridiculous. Yes, I laughed at Alfred Smythe's fear. How could I have known then that I was to feel the same terror, the same agonized fear which gripped the heart of John Harrington as he crouched, panting, on the branch of a tree, with another moment or two of life, while beneath him the thing came closer and closer. I'd almost forgotten the incident when, a few nights later, I was riding home on a late train. I was half drowsing in my seat, barely keeping awake by looking idly at the car advertisement. The man directly opposite me must have been doing the same, because suddenly I heard him say,
"Here now, what can that one be advertising?"
I followed his eyes to the window beside my head. What I saw brought me bolt upright in my feet.
In memory of John Harrington, died September 18th, 1937, by falling from a tree. 3 months were allowed. Blimey, what do you say that means, sir?
Well, I don't know. But I did know. Smythe had been right. The affair with Carswell was not over, but only begun. I asked the conductor about the card, but he was as puzzled as I was. He had never seen it before. The card must have been put there expressly for me. That meant that Carswell knew it was I who had reviewed his paper. How had he found out? I got the answer the next day. I was in the select manuscript department of the British Museum doing some research in the quiet, almost deserted room. I'd been working steadily for an hour, oblivious to my surroundings, when suddenly, just at my shoulder, I heard a voice.
"Edward Dunning, you are allowed 3 months.
I swung around in my seat. There was no one within 20 feet of me. I sat for a moment, shaken, and then I stooped to pick up the papers I had brushed to the floor. I straightened up to find a stout, elderly gentleman standing in front of me.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes?
May I give you this paper? I think it should be yours.
Oh, yes, so it is. I thought I had them all.
This one seemed to have slid across the floor.
Thank you very much.
Not at all, sir. Good afternoon.
He walked slowly away and out of the door. A kindly, stout old gentleman. But there was something about him that made me feel strange. I went over to the attendant.
Yes, Mr. Dunning?
Did you notice that gentleman I was just speaking to?
Oh, yes, of course.
Can you tell me his name?
Why, that's Mr. Carswell. As a matter of fact, he was asking about you only the other day.
Asking about me?
Well, he asked who were the great authorities on medieval science. And of course, I told him you were the only one in the country.
Oh, I see.
Would you like to meet him, Mr. Dunning? I'll see if I can...
No. No, thank you. It was as simple as that. Now Carswell knew.
A fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty hi-yo
What was I to
silver. The Lone Ranger.
I reached home at dusk, and trouble stood on my doorstep in the long face and stooped form of my grandson.
Your hospital arrangements, I'm sorry to say, Dunning. I've had to send both your servants
This
to
is the
hospital.
legend of a man and a horse,
What happened?
and how they met.
Something
The story
like
of the Lone
poisoning, I
Ranger
think.
and his great horse, Silver.
What did you call it?
Well, that's the rather odd thing. They tell me they bought
The Lone Ranger and Tonto were trailing the worst outlaw in the West. His name was Butch Cavendish. They had followed his trail for many weeks, until finally they noticed that the hoof prints of the outlaw's horse were fresh.
We're close to Cavendish now.
Yes, Tonto,
Was this
we
the
can't
next
be far
move?
ahead.
Came
If
out
so,
from us
it
last
had
time.
succeeded.
Maybe better we
I was
shoot
alone
inside.
in the house,
No, I want to
and
take
my
him
nervous
alive.
features darkened closely
shot.
in the hours
Steady
of
there,
time
steady,
before
boy.
midnight.
Over there. Killer
I
in
went to
ambush.
bed.
Him right way.
Tonto, he
It
missed
almost
me, but he shot my
I thought
horse.
I heard
Get
him.
after him.
Get him up,
My
fella.
study door opening down.
Tonto's horse was tired and no match in speed
I
for
went
the
out and
animal
leaned over the
Cavendish
bank.
rode. The outlaw escaped.
There was nothing moving.
When Tonto returned from the futile chase,
There was only a
he found the Lone Ranger
surprising
standing
gust of
beside his
warm
dead
air
horse.
spreading
A good
around.
horse, Tonto. Loyal, faithful, and
I went
brave.
back into my
But
room.
my next
and
horse
locked
must
the
be
door.
faster. I wish that...
Suddenly, the lights went out,
Tonto, we've heard stories
No
of
doubt
a
it was
wild
only a
horse,
blown
fiery
sheep.
white stallion.
but the chills
Him
were
seen
playing up
near
and
valley
down my
over
spine.
there, where Cavendish go.
I went over
We'll
to
be
the
on the
gate
lookout for
and
the
reached
wild
my
horse
watch
while we
over the
follow
floor.
Cavendish.
I suppose I wanted to find out the time. I didn't reply. But fumbling on the pillow, my hand touched something far
Tonto's
different
horse carried
from
the
a
Lone
watch.
Ranger's saddle, his
It was
saddlebags,
like a
and
mouse
bridle, while the
with
masked
sharp
man and the
teeth
Indian
and
continued
hair
on
around
foot
it,
along
not
the outlaw's
human at
trail.
all.
When they reached the top of a hill,
Look, Tonto.
they halted suddenly and stared at an awe-inspiring
and
sight
sped
far
along
down in the
little
valley.
night locked in the spare room, my ear to the door.
They saw a great white stallion in a
But
death
nothing
fight
came.
with a giant buffalo.
I was not
The horse
disturbed
was
again.
plunging, rearing, charging, and
the
dodging
morning, I
wildly.
searched the house
And
and
the
found nothing
sun
unusual.
flashed from his coat as from a
But the
coat of
mark of
polished
fear must have
silver.
been stamped on my
They
face,
realized
but
that
my
this
notice-
was the legendary white
Yes,
stallion,
if you
the
haven't
one
slept for
ranchers and
weeks.
hunters had
Is
talked so
anything
much
wrong?
about.
Tonto,
I-
we must have
I
that
don't
horse.
know.
I'll try to shoot the buffalo.
It's too far for pistol shot.
I'll get closer before it's too late.
As he ran downhill, the Lone Ranger watched the
I
battle.
told him to
The
leave.
sleek white stallion was nimble and courageous, but his strength began to
Has
wane.
anything
The
happened
buffalo
yet? I don't
charged
know.
again and again. The splendid
Probably
muscles
my
of the
mind
white
is
horse
not
were
as
slower in
quick as
responding, then too slow.
Like
He
that
was
man
caught by the
Hamilton.
buffalo's
I
charge.
have 3 months
Wet
left.
crimson stained his pure white coat. Another charge.
hearing
The white
things.
horse saw it coming and
All
he couldn't
on
dodge.
edge. I don't
He
know
staggered
what.
and fell. The monster
John
drew
Harrington
back
had
and
a
lowered
brother
his head
Henry.
for the death charge.
Perhaps
And
I'd
then
better get you
2
in
shots
touch with
rang
him.
out.
He might know more
The
about
buffalo
this man.
shuddered from the
Yes,
impact of
do
the
it.
masked
And
man's
quickly.
bullets. For an
3
instant,
months
he stood
is not
motionless,
enough time.
then fell.
It was arranged. That night, I found myself walking down the dark street that led from the railway station to Harrington home. It must have been along this same street that John Harrington had walked that last night.
Cruelly
Where he broke
battered
and
and
run.
bruised, the
It
white
must have been
stallion
one
lay
of these
quietly
trees,
as the Lone
bordering the
Ranger
lonely road
bathed his
in which he had
wounds.
spent his last.
During the next
Horrible
several days,
moment.
the masked man and the Indian cared for the injured horse. Then the wounds were closed.
The way was
and the
dark,
horse's strength had
and there was
returned.
no living soul.
There was
in
once
sight.
more fire in his eye,
And
a
suddenly,
spring in his step,
complete
and his
terror
head was
gripped me.
lifted proudly.
Somehow I knew it was being fought.
Tonto, he's
At first I
himself
only felt it, and
again.
then I heard it.
Him plenty strong. Plenty good horse.
I wonder if
I
he'll
walked
take a
steadily
saddle.
on for a moment.
Let's
my
try.
stomach like ice.
Steady
It
there.
was getting louder,
Steady,
coming
boy.
closer. Unconsciously, my steps quickened. I could barely control myself. I wanted to
No,
scream
Tonto,
and
wait.
run. The thing came
Go.
closer and closer.
I'd like to have that horse more than anything in the world. But he deserves his freedom. He fought for it.
I confess,
He's turned
I
to look
broke
at
and
us.
ran madly
See
for
how
my
the
life.
sun reflects from his white coat.
I was at a little side street. I turned down to
Him
doubling
look
back
like
toward the railway
silver.
station. I thought I would never make it.
Silver.
But finally, bright lights
a
loomed
name
before
for
my
him.
eyes, and I think that I never have been so
Silver!
grateful for human companionship.
Silver! Hey, Silver!
The 840 won't be along for another 5
Tonto, he's coming back. It's just as if he knew what I said.
I felt very foolish.
Silver!
I couldn't bring myself to walk
Silver,
back
you
down the
beauty.
street to Harrington.
Hand me the halter, Tonto.
I could only take the train home.
As the mighty stallion felt the
Call
halter,
Harrington
he
next
trembled
morning.
as if from a chill. Every instinct told
He
him that he
seemed
must
very
flee at once to preserve his
And asked
freedom.
no question.
And yet he stood his
I thought it
ground.
was smart that told
It
him
wasn't
something about
gratitude that kept
At
him
any rate,
there.
he agreed to
It was
visit
something
me at
stronger,
2 nights
some
later.
mysterious bond of
And when he
friendship and
arrived, Miss
understanding.
Welcome,
He heard the
began
man's
talking
voice,
to his brother.
and he liked it.
Dunning,
Silver.
John was in a very bad state for
Silver.
weeks before the
We're
accident.
going to be partners.
If that's what it was. The principal
let you
thing seemed to
use
be the
halter.
notion that he was being
Now, Tonto,
followed.
the
It
saddle.
became an obsession.
Yes,
no
I
horse
know.
like that. Take saddle.
I don't
Never
think
was
the
a
death
horse
was
like
for that.
this.
Then
Now, Silver,
you can
we're
explain
going
it.
to
No.
work together.
The horse was
But I had
wild
one
and
clue.
unused to the ways of
Your
men, and the
brother
weight of a
reviewed the
saddle
book
and a
very
rider.
severely not
But the
long before he
masked
died.
man was a kind teacher. He was gentle yet firm, and Silver was
Just
intelligent.
lately, I happened to cross
The
the
stallion
path
seemed
of the
to
man
sense
who
the
wrote
desires of the Lone Ranger
of
and did
course
his best to
is Carver.
cooperate.
That's
He
right.
learned quickly, and after
far as I'm
several days of
concerned,
training, he was ready.
Follow me,
Before he
Tonto.
died, John
I'm
was
going
beginning
after
to feel
Cavendish.
much against his
Come on,
will
Silver!
that Carswell was at the bottom of his trouble. Why?
No hoofs had ever beat the plains like those thundering hoofs of the
My
great
brother
horse
liked you.
Silver.
Went to
During
all
the past few
concerts in
days,
town.
Cavendish
Made a
had gotten
hobby
far
of
away,
collecting
but the masked man and
One
Tonto
night,
trailed him
about 3 months before
relentlessly
his death,
with only a minimum
brought
of
them
rest.
home and showed it to me.
It took days to cut
I
down the
made a
outlaw's
biscuit
lead,
one.
but at long last, Cavendish came into view.
There he is.
Put it under
Come on,
his feet.
Silver!
And the neighbor,
The mighty stallion responded with a new burst of speed.
He had drawn his.
Cavendish fired wild shots over his shoulder until his gun was empty. His horse, though powerful and fast, was no match for the charging Silver. Fear and panic filled the outlaw's face. He heard the hoof beats ever nearer, and then the masked man shout,
I want you, Cavendish!
The masked man's avowed mission was accomplished. The last of the Cavendish gang was captured to be tried by law and punished for his crimes. But there were many others whose criminal plans were to be challenged by the Lone Ranger, his faithful Indian companion Tonto, and his great horse Silver.
He should have returned.
Nothing to be done then.
That's not. Do you know what Rune's letters mean?
They're old three-tiered script, I believe. The kind of writing the barbaric tribes used long before the Romans invaded Britain.
Yes, that's right. Casting the runes, they used to call it in the old days. Casting the runes.
What do you mean?
But it was a curse, a hex. In primitive England, people thought by casting the runes, that is, handing a person a piece of paper with certain runic letters on it, that could put that person out of the way, destroy him. It's an old superstition. And the only way to lift the curse was to return the paper to the one who gave it to you. To give it back without his knowing it.
What? I don't believe that kind of nonsense.
Neither do I.
Then what was it that killed John?
I don't know. Perhaps his fear of the runes, perhaps brooding about it, becoming neurotic, thinking he saw things and heard things and touched things that weren't there. Perhaps his own mind drove him to death.
And what's the difference once you're dead?
No difference at all.
Casting the runes. Oh, rubbish.
Yes, of course, but... Good heavens.
What is it?
I just remembered that day at the British Museum. He cast the runes on me. I went swiftly to the writing table, Harrington close behind me. My portfolio was there, full of the scribbled notes I'd been working on that day in the museum. And as I took it in my shaking hand and began leaping desperately through them, one strip of thin, light paper slipped and fluttered toward the open window with uncanny quickness. But Harrington was even quicker and slammed the window shut just in time.
Got it?
Oh, thank heaven. If it were lost or destroyed, like your brother...
Then you wouldn't be able to return it to Mr. Carswell. Yes. Look at it. It's identical with the one John's got.
I looked at the flimsy paper. The characters, carefully traced in red and black, were runes, all right. That ancient language used by the Aborigines of prehistoric Britain. I couldn't decipher them. But as Harrington and I stood looking into each other's eyes, each of us could read the other's thoughts. Science or not, 20th century or not, this sheet of foolscap spells death for its possessor.
It spells death for you.
Be returned.
Yes, I know.
Let's go back in such a way that he doesn't know he's received it. That means we can't simply mail it.
No, we can't.
We must do it personally. That'll take doing.
Well, he knows you by sight, doesn't he?
Yes.
You must shave your beard. It'll alter your appearance. He might strike any time.
I had 3 months. That's what the warning said.
We've got to make good on his stunning. I've searched 10 years for my brother's murderer, and now he must not escape.
I dare not go near Carswell, so Harrington volunteered to keep a watch on him, to let me know when our chance came to return the runes, if it was ever to come. It was only a night or two after Harrington was there that I arrived home and found the calendar had come in the mail. When I examined it, I found everything after November 19th had been torn out. The next night, I had another envelope of the mail. This time it was a woodcut, an illustration torn out of a book, showing a dark, moonlit road and a man walking on it. And right behind him came a huge, dark shape, some awful demon creature. Under it were written some lines from the Ancient Mariner. And as I sat alone and read them aloud, I felt that now familiar gust of warm air playing about my legs. The man walks on and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful fiend doth close behind him tread. Now I knew the face of my terror, and it was with me always. Walking down the dark street at night, I heard its footsteps behind me. In my lonely house at midnight, it roamed the halls. Like the Ancient Mariner and John Harrington, I never turned to look. I couldn't. My nerves were going, and I could do nothing but wait. The days, the weeks slipped by, and still Harrington had no plan. I checked off the days on the calendar Carswell had sent. Now there were 8 days remaining, then 6, then 3, 2, 1. It was the evening of the 18th. My last day on Earth was to begin at midnight. I was sitting alone in my living room, bathed in perspiration, fighting to keep my nerves in check. Suddenly, I felt that warm gust of air. I listened. There were soft footsteps. A shadow seemed to cross the hall door. And then the footsteps blended into a loud bang. No, not yet. I've still got 1 day more. Not yet.
Johnny, it's me.
Oh, thank heaven. Harry.
What's the matter, man? What is it?
It was you knocking on the door. Your footsteps.
Yes, of course.
Oh, thank heaven. I thought...
Now, look, man, you've got to pull yourself together. It's tonight we have our chance.
What chance?
Carswell leaves Victoria Station by boat train tonight at 10. I'll get on with him there. You take the car I brought and drive to Croydon. Get on the train there. And be sure to bring the paper.
Yes, I have it.
You've shaved already. Good. Everything depends on his not recognizing you.
Mr. Harrington. Suppose he changes his mind. Suppose he doesn't take that trip. My time runs out tomorrow.
He'll be there, and you'll do it. You'll do it well. You've got to.
I stood on the platform at Croydon, my mind in a daze. I thought the train would never come, but it did. I saw Harrington at the window. He stared coolly at me. Of course, there was to be no sign of recognition. I entered the coach and slowly made my way down the aisle to the compartment where Harrington sat. Opposite him, staring full into my face, was Carswell. He looked up as I sat down. His eyes were heavy-lidded, his face bland. It was impossible to tell whether he knew. The train started. The next stop was Dover, at the end of the line. My last chance. It was time to cast the rune. It was a strange ride. Carswell and I seated face to face, staring into each other's eyes. Harrington off to the side, pulling at his face with twitching fingers. If I could have only had a few whispered moments with him to plan our strategy, but that was impossible. Moments dragged tortuously. No one moved. Then suddenly Carswell leaned forward.
I beg your pardon, sir. Haven't we met?
Met? Well, I don't think so, sir. Not unless you're in the plumbing business.
Plumbing? No. Hardly.
I hadn't planned it that way. The words, the accent just seemed to come by themselves. And Carswell sat back, an enigmatic expression on his face. I wished desperately to know what he was thinking. Then suddenly he got up and went out into the corridor. It was my chance. I was about to slip over to his bags to see if there were a way to secrete the rooms within them. When I caught Harrington's eye and read a warning in them. Carswell from the corridor was watching, waiting to see if we recognized each other. I muttered a prayer of thanks I hadn't moved. Carswell came back and took his seat. As he did so, wild, exultant hope surged up in my throat, for something slipped off his feet and dropped noiselessly to the floor. It was his ticket case, and he didn't see it. Small cardboard ticket case with a pocket on the cover. If I could just get to it and slip that tiny piece of paper into that pocket. For 15 agonizing minutes, I sat there and stared at it. If only Carswell would go out. But he sat stolidly staring straight ahead. We were coming into the outskirts of Dover, the train slowing down. Suddenly, Harrington stood up, reached up to the rack above Carswell to get his coat and bag. I stared at him blankly for a moment, surprised by his sudden clumsiness. And then I realized what he was up to. The bag, the coat, the briefcase all came tumbling down upon Carswell.
What's the devil? Oh, I say I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry.
You clumsy fool, you might have injured me. What were you trying to do?
Well, it was my only chance. Carswell stood facing Harrington. I reached down, got the ticket case, and with trembling fingers slid the paper into the pocket. He turned sharply to me, and I extended the case toward him.
Excuse me, sir. Is this yours? Yes, it's my ticket case. Where'd you find it? Here on the floor. Must have dropped off when... Yes. I'm much obliged to you, sir. Not at all. Not at all.
He looked at me fiercely, his rage at Harrington still twisting his face into a devil's mask. Then he glanced briefly into the ticket case and put it into his pocket. On the railway pier at Dover, Harrington and I followed a few steps behind Carswell. I felt like I might faint. Carswell went straight to the gangway of the boat, and there the purser stopped him.
Sir, does your friend have a ticket? My friend? What the devil do you mean? I'm traveling alone. Well, that's funny. I could have sworn there was another gentleman right there beside you, walking just at your elbow. Well, there isn't. And I suggest you see an oculist. Oh, I didn't see. I just felt. Sorry, sir. Must have been your rug. My mistake.
Come on, Dunning. Our job's done.
I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake and listened. But there were no footsteps, no warm gusts of air, nothing to disturb me. All day I felt remarkably free, although this was to have been my last day on Earth. But only just now, when Harrington came in, could I really relax.
Mr. Dunning, have you seen the afternoon paper yet?
I know, not yet.
Well, here, look at it. On the second page. There.
Abbeville, France. An English traveler examining the front of St. Wolfram's Cathedral today was struck on the head and killed instantly by a stone falling from the scaffolding. A note of mystery was added by the fact that although the cathedral was undergoing repairs, no workman was on the scaffolding at the time of the accident. The traveler was identified by papers found on him as a Mr. Carswell of Warwickshire.
Of course, it could have been an accident.
Yes. Yes, it could have been.
Escape is produced and directed by William N. Robeson, and tonight brought you Casting the Runes by Montague R. James. Adapted for radio by Irving Ravitch and John Dunkel, with John McIntyre as Edward Dunning, Jan Wolfe as Harrington, and Bill Conrad as Carswell. The special musical score was conceived and conducted by Cy Shure. Next week...
You are trapped in a hidden valley, high in the Andes, walled in by sheer rock precipices, and surrounding you, closing in on you, is a band of blind men who want your eyes.
Next week, we escape with H.G. Wells' gripping story, The Country of the Blind. Good night, then, until this same time next week when we again offer you Escape. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.